Hi guys, so today I will talk about the virtualization and the virtual machine. So in this lecture, we're gonna learn about a very important concept in the IT, which is the virtualization and virtual machine. We're gonna see what virtual machines are, why are they so useful, and learn all main concepts of how virtualization works. So let's see what a virtual machine is. Imagine you have Windows computer, and as we learn, a computer has hardware like CPU, RAM, and storage. We will have Windows operating system. On top of that, that controls how application use these hardware resources. And the top of that is the application that talk to Windows. Now, what if you want to use Linux instead? Maybe for your work or you just want to learn operating system. For then, you will need a machine with hardware resources and Linux operating system on top of that. And then you could run application on that Linux operating system. So basically, you will be needing another computer, another laptop where you would install the Linux operating system. Now, what virtualization is that you need a separate physical hardware or physical computer to install an operating system. You can install Linux operating system on top of the Windows OS or vice versa. You can install Windows on Linux or Windows on Mac OS or any combination basically. So you can achieve that using hypervisor. Hypervisor is a technology which allows on top of the operating system that you already have installed, and one of the most popular hypervisor we have the VirtualBox Oracle. One of the main reasons for its popularity is because it is open source and VirtualBox works on all operating system. So VirtualBox is let you create a virtual computer by telling the Windows operating system, hey, can I have some of your hardware resources that you manage to create a virtual CPU, virtual RAM, virtual storage for my virtual computer. And as I've said, you can have multiple virtual machines that are running on your computer through a hypervisor. Now, note here that you can only give a hardware resources that actually have on that computer. If you have 8 gigabytes of RAM and your Windows is using 4 gigabytes and you give your virtual machine another 4 gigabyte and you have no RAM left to be used for another virtual machine, so you can create another one. So basically now you are sharing a hardware resources on one machine to run multiple virtual machines. So this means as long as you have one computer with one operating system, using the hypervisor like VirtualBox, you can install other operating system on top of it. But these virtual machines actually don't see each other and they're completely isolated. So virtual machine itself thinks that it is an independent computer. It is the only one running on the computer. It doesn't even know that is virtual machine, and it doesn't know that it is hosted on top of the another program system. And that separation is actually great because if something happens to that virtual machine, something breaks inside or someone hacks inside that virtual machine, it won't affect the main operating system. The main OS probably even know that VM has some issues and it doesn't care. So when this happens, you can just delete that VM and create fresh new one and super easily. Now, you'll probably be asking, what is the usage or the benefits of having hypervisor of your computer? First of all, it's really great for learning new operating system. So now you don't need to buy a new computer and install Linux on it. You just basically host on it on your Windows machine if you want to. Maybe you just want to experiment or play around on operating system, but you don't want to actually destroy or endanger your main operating system. So you can quickly spin up a virtual machine. You could play around with it and you can do all the stuff you want, and then once you're done with it, you just basically remove it. Another great use for virtual machine, if you want to test your application, like web application you're developing, maybe you want to see how does it works and how does it looks like in different operating system and different browsers. So you may be developing on a Mac OS laptop and you want to see your application performs on Linux machine on the Firefox browser, and you may also want to see how your application works on Windows, on Internet Explorer browser. So you can create virtual machines for both on this combination and test your application there, and when you're done you can just delete them. So now let's see what is the difference between type 1 and type 2 hypervisor. And this type of hypervisor that I just described, which is basically creating virtual machines on top of an existing operating system, is called a type 2 hypervisor. So you have the host operating system or the main operating system, which is already installed on the hardware on the machine, and then operating system you installed hypervisor like VirtualBox, and then using the VirtualBox you can install guest operating system. And the guest operating system, as I've said, you will borrow the hardware resources from the host operating system. And the type 2 hypervisor are typically used for personal computers like what I'm doing right now. However, for the big servers like companies are using, you have the second type of hypervisor, which is type 1 hypervisor, which actually works in exactly the same way. However, the main difference is that instead of installing the hypervisor, you basically installing directly on the hardware. And that's why the type 1 hypervisors are also called bare metal hypervisor. So the hypervisor controls the resources, instead talking to the host operating system whether it can borrow the resources for its virtual machine. So it sits directly on the top of the hardware and controls everything. And some of the popular example of type 1 hypervisor are VMware ESXi or Microsoft Hyper-V. And once installed, basically the concept is the same with the type 2 hypervisor. You basically just install, the concept is the same. You basically just install any operating system on top of it. So for big servers, you have one physical server with a bare metal hypervisor installed on it, and then you would have multiple virtual machines that are running on that hypervisor, all sharing the same hardware resources. In type 1 hypervisor, you mostly would, there is big company use, big cloud platform usually used to create their whole infrastructure in type 1 hypervisor. So when you create a server instance on a cloud platform like AWS or Google Cloud or whatever cloud platform, you're creating these virtual machines on the physical server. And other users will create an instance and get a virtual machine in the same exact physical server as your virtual machine. As I've said, these VMs are completely isolated. They don't know anything about each other. So if something happens in one virtual machine and someone gets hacked whose VMs has the same physical server, you won't even know it because each VM is running on its own isolated environment. They don't share network, they don't share any resources, and they do not share anything, and completely independent from each other. What are the use cases of the type 1 hypervisors? What is basically the big advantage of the companies going other using this virtualization on their server infrastructure? One big advantage of using virtualization and hosting multiple virtual machines on one physical machine is efficient usage of hardware resources, because you may have this performance big servers on a cloud, or cloud providers can actually let the users put together any combination of resources they want in their instance by picking and choosing how much CPU, how much RAM, how much storage they want. So they have this flexibility of choosing the size of their instances because everything is virtualized, right? So now the cloud providers, they can actually use up all their server or physical server resources by actually dividing them into small pieces that are used on virtual machine. Now there is one more very important benefit and basically transformation that happened in IT industry because of virtualization, and that is basically abstracting away of the operating system that is run from the hardware itself. and that abstraction is a really big deal. And let's see why. So before virtualization, when a company had a server like their own database server or server where Jenkins are running, they will manage it themselves, like install an operating system directly on it, or installing application on operating system, like installing a configuration Jenkins or installing database application, etc. And when the operating system is installed directly on the hardware without a hypervisor layer in between, the operating system is entirely coupled to the hardware. That means if the hardware component of the computer failed, like the hard disk exploded or the motherboard failed, whatever, and you couldn't replace the component and you cannot find that component anymore, or maybe not a repairable component, and for whatever reason your whole computer will be useless, and the operating system and the application you installed and configured on it will be gone. So relying on that one physical box meant one point of failure, and therefore high risk of losing all the resources on running on that machine. With virtualization, however, you have your operating system, which is portable file that you can move around, and these files are virtual machine images. So that portable file image, you have the operating system, all the application, the browser application, the editors, the Jenkins, and whatever application you would usually install on the operating system, files, pictures, documents, basically everything would be inside the portable file. And since it's a file, just like a picture or a text document, you can make copies of it and you can have backup on it. And it's amazing because it is useful for companies. That means you can take your whole Jenkins server operating system and pack it into portable image where all your Jenkins configuration, all your plugins, all your database would be inside exactly as you configure it, and you can backup on that image, which are called snapshot, right? So you have operating system snapshot. And note that if something happens of that virtual image where Jenkins are running, like mess up Jenkins configuration or someone hacked into the hardware, you could simply just take that snapshot image and simply run it on the computer with hypervisor on it. So by containing the operating system and application layer of it in a portable file, you can secure your application and work very easily. And you can move it around machines without being dependent on any physical server. So the virtual machine and the virtualization concept generally is very powerful, and that's why you see in anywhere IT, and it is completely changed the way you work, whether you want to be a cloud engineer, system administration, software developer, or DevOps engineer. You need to understand the virtualization because you would be working with virtual machines. So I think that's it for today, guys. I hope you appreciate it. If you want to see how to install a operating system on your virtual machine, you may watch my recent video regarding on that. So that's it for today, guys. Thank you.